The Sony PlayStation physical media controversy has gotten even more nuclear as people are now boycotting and canceling their Plus subscriptions in open rebellion against Sony. And Sony is doubling down on repurposing their entire manufacturing future already, as well as other companies are mocking Sony, as fans are openly rejecting their whole decision pretty much, and they want to increase the prices of their services on top of everything else, if you can believe it. Like, where do I even start with this one? I guess let's start with Sony's PS Plus cancellations first, and then we'll move on to the physical media future stuff later. As seen here from Insider Gaming, PlayStation fans are canceling PS Plus in protest of digital future. If you haven't noticed, people are really mad about this. I don't blame them either. One of the only ways that people are able to actually hit Sony where it hurts is to unsubscribe en masse, and it's working. Here's one user who confirmed that they refunded not only Grand Theft Auto Ultimate Edition, but also canceled their PlayStation Plus as well, which that's a big statement to make. Another user is seen here confirms they are not renewing their PlayStation Plus come July 14th when it expires for them. Another user is seen here also canceled their Plus subscription as well in open defiance against Sony. Another user also confirms, yep, they canceled as well. Here's another person confirming they too are canceling Sony services due to the physical media stuff. Another user here rallies others to cancel their PS Plus as they do the same. I like how Sony's automated email also says, "We're sorry to see you go." I mean, you caused this to happen. What do you mean you're sorry? But here's another user confirming they're canceling as well. Here's another user also saying they're done with PlayStation and canceling. I could keep going, but you get the point. Everywhere is filled with people just canceling their subscriptions. All of these posts shown alone, they come from this post here, where this user showed people how to cancel their subscriptions. The point being is that people are walking away from PlayStation en masse. But not only are people walking away from Sony in mass protests, a lot of users are also citing the Insomniac leak that happened, if you don't remember, as more reasons for why this whole thing is kind of bogus the more you look into it. So if you forgot, Insomniac, that's the Spider-Man, Wolverine, Ratchet & Clank development studio that got hacked a while back, well, tons of stuff actually got leaked, like future games and more. That's how we know the Venom game is coming at some point and then some. Anyways, the part that matters here is from the Insomniac leak that key information got shown that revealed how Sony's first-party games were selling in a physical versus a digital format. As GameGPU.com reported here recently, the Insomniac leak tells a very different story compared to what Sony is actually saying publicly. As they say here, recent claims that digital versions of games account for 78% of total PlayStation console sales have been taken out of context. This statistic includes numerous indie titles and older games that are exclusively available digitally, significantly distorting the overall picture. To objectively assess true demand, it's necessary to consider major releases that were released simultaneously on physical media and in digital stores. So already the numbers are being manipulated on purpose in order to paint a different picture than what Sony is actually saying. It does get more in depth though. Let's read this next part. Data from Insomniac Games leaked last year reveals a completely different picture. According to internal Sony documents, 31 of the 33 major story-driven exclusives sold more on physical discs. Uncharted 4 accounted for 83% of physical sales. Sackboy and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart accounted for over 75%. Spider-Man and The Last of Us Part 2 accounted for over 60%. Digital sales dominated primarily in the games as a service segment, such as MLB The Show, the baseball game, where users prefer to stick with discs for regular gaming sessions. So essentially, Sony saying their games sell less on physical to such a degree might actually not be the full truth. Of course, the games that are being used from the Insomniac leak come from years back, but since then things could have changed dramatically. Either way, the evidence points that in terms of Sony's first-party games, they have not in fact sold better digitally over physically, at least according to Insomniac's internal leak data. And as they said, the numbers being skewed could be using digital-only games as a pivot to influence those decisions. So why do that? Well, it's simple. Publishers have to pay upwards of 30% of each copy sold to retailers when you buy them physically. So in general, they're losing 30% of their profits per copy sold to you in a store, but if that were digital only, well, they get it all, first party anyways. So this pivot, in theory, could be happening in order to ensure that Sony has complete control, but in return, you are losing options. This can't even be disputed. I mean, again, it leaked from Insomniac, a first-party Sony studio themselves. Although the backpedaling is already happening. We have damage control articles like this one recently from Vice that states that only 12% of sales sales of Sony's top-selling games were from physical sales in 2026. The source that Vice is referencing is Alinea Analytics, which posted the games that have sold the most on PS5 and how much each game sold digital versus physical. Here's the image they're referring to. EA Sports FC 26 is the highest selling game on PlayStation this year. As you can see, apparently 12% of sales were physical, the overwhelming was digital. For Resident Evil Requiem below it, 27.8% of sales were physical, the rest were digital. Arc Raiders obviously was all digital because it's a digital only game, which again, that will dramatically skew the digital versus physical debate when that game isn't even available physically anyways, which is not really fair, but it is what it is. As it keeps going, the physical split is smaller than digital either way, and they again also use games like Forza Horizon 5 as another digital gacha card, but that game too is digital only on PlayStation, so again, it skews heavily in one direction too. Another big part of this article is that FC 26 was also used by 6.4 million PlayStation users via PlayStation Plus itself. However, Vice also confirms, as I highlighted there, that first-party PlayStation games are indeed selling more physically than third-party, and they also cite that Insomniac leak too. So even the damage control articles that are coming out in defense of Sony, they can't even deny that physical is, to some capacity, still a viable way of selling games, because there is absolutely a fan base out there who buys them. For me, I always buy my JRPG games physically, especially if they're made by niche dev studios. Even then I still do it, because those copies are very hard to come by as the years go on. Even from AAA studios, like I love owning physical versions of, say, all the Final Fantasy games, right? I usually buy Final Fantasy games twice myself. One to play that I will buy digitally or even physically, and then one to keep sealed physically on my shelf too. Is it a drain on my wallet? Absolutely, I know it is, but I do it anyways. Because if it's for a game I love, I have no problem double dipping myself, but the point still stands. Physical is still something that people want, obviously. I mean, we've seen games that are older rise in price like crazy for a long time too. You can go to any mom and pop shop that sells games and see what I mean. Super Nintendo games still sell for hundreds of dollars a pop, as do old school PlayStation 1 games. Even PS3 ones. For example, X-Men Origins Wolverine on PS3, as seen here on Canadian eBay, is $110 for a game that is well over a decade old. I think PlayStation software that is physical, if kept in mint condition and preserved, could in theory become the next batch of games that people decades in the future seek out at higher price points too, like we do Super Nintendo and stuff right now. Because again, owning a game physically, or really anything, it just hits different, right? I still own my PS1 Final Fantasy games. I still have Chrono Cross and Legend of Dragoon on PlayStation 1 physically on my shelf. Those games mean something to me. I think getting rid of physical in general is just a bad idea. I mean, physical media is still huge. Go look at how large the Pokemon card industry is right now. Even Magic the Gathering is still making boatloads of money too, right? For example, I collect the Final Fantasy Magic the Gathering cards. When I buy the booster boxes, they were originally around $200 each. Now, as seen here, they're like $300 each. And don't even get me started on how expensive the special booster box bundles cost. They're like thousands now. The point is that physical media is important because they are collector's items. That is what they are. I mean, I have a massive collection of Yu-Gi-Oh cards from when I was a kid still to this day, and I'm still buying them. I want all the originals. I wouldn't care about those cards if I had them only in a digital format, but the fact that I have them physically in my hand and I can see them and hold them, I mean, that's everything, man. That's why physical matters, and Sony is 100% ruining that future of that potential industry and that fan base by doing what they're doing. It's no wonder why people are refunding their PS Plus and walking away the way that they are, because Sony's not catering to what these people want anymore. Even IGN has taken the side of the players, which is not very common for them. As seen here, they call PlayStation's decision offensive, and you cannot trust digital purchases, and you cannot trust the corporations that offer them. Based, actually. I love to see that. As IGN said it here, the ability to simply re-download content we've purchased in the past should be a bare minimum service, and I agree with that. In my previous video about Sony, I spoke on Studio Canal. That's a distributor of movies, okay? So they revoked over 500 movies from PlayStation's library. And whether people paid for those movies or not, they were removed nonetheless because you ultimately did not own them. And once those licenses ran out, which they did, everyone who bought those movies lost their access for forever. And that's scary, right? Because that is 100% losing access to what you paid for. That's why people are in open rebellion right now, because you don't own anything. The crazier part is that Sony has already turned that switch, and things are now moving very, very quickly, okay? Look at this here. The Verge reported that Sony's disc factory factory that has created the vast majority of their physical inventory is already being repurposed. The factory, which is located in Austria, has already been notified in advance of these changes, and Sony has also invested a further $34 million into the factory in order to repurpose that factory to shift from making PlayStation physical media to now optical micro lenses instead. These micro lenses can be used in AR or VR headsets, medical devices, or camera sensors. But the days of Sony's factories making physical discs to ship out around the world is already ending for their biggest factories, which tells me that this is happening whether people want it or not, because I doubt that Sony is going to, pivot back from their tens of millions in investments here to shift to something else now. Other brands are already making fun of Sony too for their changes because it's stupid. Like KFC, for example, is seen here, who said their food will no longer be available to eat, but instead you can now only eat their food through fake PNG formats, obviously to make fun of Sony. KFC didn't even stop there. They then said here that they will release DLC when it comes to sauces, and that each will be sold separately, and within the year they're going to introduce the fried chicken pass so you can get the whole catalog for a monthly price. Obviously it's fake, I know that, but they're still making fun of PlayStation Plus with that one, and that's great. You also won't even be able to use VPNs to access their menu in other countries, as KFC says here, or even share your chicken with friends. Again, a clear joke about Sony not allowing game sharing, and if you pirate their chicken, they're going to come and find you at your house. They're having fun, at least somebody is, but when KFC puts it like that, yeah, it's kind of ridiculous when you say it out loud. Even Domino's Pizza had fun with this, where they said this: in response to trends in the gaming industry, as of the 1st April 2027, Domino's UK will cease production of physical pizzas and shift to production of digital pizzas only. Consumers will be able to download our full range of delicious pizza codes and, using the power of the imagination, enjoy them in an entirely virtual sense. All I gotta say is, yes, just keep clowning on Sony, okay? I love to see it. Keep doing it. But if the public embarrassment and the repurposing of their factories wasn't enough, Sony has also announced that PlayStation Plus as a service is going to get even more expensive potentially, as Insider Gaming said here. So the gist of this was that Sony CEO Hideaki Nishino, alongside Herman Hulst and others at PlayStation, were answering questions with investors as to what the future of the whole company will have, obviously. And the general idea was that, as you can see here, that Nishino said that PS Plus is offering strong value to their player base, and that currently 40% of PS Plus users are subscribed to the highest tier of Plus available, because it gives them access to everything, obviously. But while PS Plus is a key driver of profit for Sony, the challenge is, according to Sony, they need to ensure that the service is able to continue as it needs to keep requiring new games to be added constantly to the service. For example, in July 2026, which is right now as this video being made, Modern Warfare 3 is the main headline game for PS Plus users, a game that took hundreds of millions of dollars to create for Activision. And if people stay subscribed, they can continue to play these games they have in their accounts for as long as they are still subscribed. For example, I have been using PS Plus since about 2012 or 2013, I think it was. So the amount of games that I have saved in my library from redeeming games every single month is borderline ridiculous. I think the majority of my library on PlayStation is the Plus games. It's gotten to the point where it's better, honestly, to not buy as many games because they might just be added to the service anyways. Personally, for me, at glance anyways, PS Plus is a solid deal on paper. I think if someone were to buy a PS5 or even a 4 right now, they would subscribe to Plus for a year and they would objectively get more games that way through the service than spending extra money to play them one by one. But regardless of that value, which is a lot, I will admit, the end-all gotcha argument is still yes. At the end, you still don't own anything. And you're right, you don't. At any moment, right, Sony can remove anything they want, which they do. Every month, some game gets removed from these services. They do. And this, again, ties into that whole digital future and why people are so angry about this, and rightfully so. Because yes, you own nothing in this sense, right? So to many, what's even the point? And if all your games access is tied to PS Plus, which is likely many people at PlayStation, then a price hike for another update for PS Plus in the future is going to be inevitable, because Sony can now just charge more and more. And then you will have to pay for it if you want that access still. Like Nintendo has also increased their pricing for their online subscription too. Xbox is the only one that has reduced their price, but that reduced price comes with games people actually wanted to play. Like for example, the new Call of Duty games are now removed, which was a big reason for why people wanted to use Game Pass in the first place. So it's all a double-edged sword is the point here. Nothing is 100% either way, but the point is that Sony is stuck making things more expensive. And eventually this will hit a point where people just can't realistically afford it anymore. The problem here, however, is that Sony gains all the advantages, while we as the people gain nothing. By repurposing the factories and the like, Sony is saving boatloads on physical costs that are being removed. But it doesn't mean that games are going to be cheaper. So you're going to be paying the same for less, essentially. And yeah, that's a problem. Honestly, in general, I think the games right now are just too expensive as is, especially in Canada where I live. It is just too much money to buy every new game. And I also saw people online raging about another potential controversy as seen here from Gaming Bible, where users were saying that their physical games trophy data and playtimes were being removed while the whole digital games that they owned were not. I did want to bring this one up because Gaming Bible and others reported that they spoke to PlayStation support about this, and they can actually confirm that this issue is a bug and Sony is actively working to resolve it right now. So for those saying that Sony is deleting physical games data from your console or like the playtime and all that, they aren't. It's a bug, but it might take a bit before that data is fixed. But I still wanted you to know that either way so that, disinformation doesn't go around. But I'm also seeing chatter that Sony is very worried about the backlash online, but I can't confirm if that one's real or not. But if that's true, that's hilarious because they deserve it. While part of me sees why the digital future is happening, it is profitable. It costs less because nothing is manufactured and all that. I get it. I still hate the idea of giving any one company more control than they currently already have. From a corporate perspective, it makes sense for them. But for us, it's where that conflict will begin, because seeing everyone push back the way that they have been doing, it has been nothing short of beautiful, honestly. I'm happy that this has united everyone the way that it has. I think everyone needs to actively push back here, no matter what opinions you have in other senses, because we have to unify in this fight together. The fact that entire storefronts are closing, like PS3 and Vita in the near future, is why this also matters. I don't think this is backlash that is happening because people hate digital. I think it's because we just don't want digital to be the only option going forward. But the problem here is that the numbers, they have been skewed. When companies are talking about how big the digital sales are for them, they're not just talking about games. They're conveniently lumping everything, right? From DLC, microtransactions, battle passes, in-game currency stuff. Even paid expansions are put into that pile. That's disingenuous. Those categories can make the overall digital percentage look much larger than if you were only comparing boxed games to downloaded full games, obviously. That doesn't mean that companies are falsifying numbers, at least so far, but it means headline statistics don't always tell the whole story, which is the point here. So when these companies are saying, oh, nobody buys physical anymore, well, that's just not true. The reality is far more nuanced than that, and they know it. I think really why they're doing this is because as long as physical games exist in retailers like Amazon and beyond, it is going to create competition for Sony. And if those used markets continue to exist, it means that people will have options beyond what's on the digital storefront. Because by having digital only, that will centralize everything, right? There's advantages to digital only, I know that, but the trade-offs, they might not be worth it in the end. It's not just Sony, I know this. Every publisher is favoring these sorts of ecosystems over other products or subscriptions over ownership. The reason why probably is revenue then becomes predictable for them. And investors, whether we want to admit it or not, they love predictability. Physical media doesn't really offer that same level of predictability because prices can then vary and range like crazy, right? Used or whatever. That's why the entire AAA industry appears to be moving in that same direction. Seeing people cancel their PlayStation Plus subscriptions, that's interesting because I wonder, will that even stay that way? For example, when GTA 6 inevitably drops in November, will people come running back to play it and then subscribe again? I don't know yet. What I do know is that Sony's getting a lot of heat, while places like Steam, who built that digital trust over decades, is currently not. Probably because Steam earned the trust of their players. They always have deep sales, they have strong refund policies, and they have hardware compatibility outside of one SKU. Steam has that open PC ecosystem, right, where users can also choose from multiple storefronts that aren't even controlled by Steam, if they prefer to buy their games and then redeem them on Steam too, right, like CD keys and all that. That is how Steam succeeded, because it made digital feel valuable. There was still choice despite the fact that you don't actually own the game. And it's not because because they eliminated the alternatives. That's an important distinction to have there. This is why I think if Sony wants to become, I guess, in a sense like Valve, if you will, they need to realize they have to embody the positives of what Valve and Steam has done for their players too. PlayStation needs better refund policies. We need more frequent sales that are also competitive, and that's key, because Sony needs to constantly look at what Xbox, Nintendo, and Steam, Epic Game Store, whatever are doing sales-wise, and then match them or do better, because they need reasons to keep people on their platform, and the best way to do that is to meet the discounts that people are enjoying somewhere else, but also have them on PlayStation 2. It's obvious that Sony's trying to become, I guess, the main gaming platform, but personally, I don't think they're going to be able to do it the way that they're doing it because their greed is getting in the way. Steam is where they're at because they are very competitive, but in a positive sense. Their prices are usually lower, right, than any other storefront, because I guarantee you, Steam is constantly checking what Sony, Xbox, Nintendo, Epic Game Store especially, and then on, and seeing what they're offering a similar game that they have at, and they're probably undercutting it by a few dollars or even more than that at least, right? And that sort of thing will add up. You have to think of gaming ecosystems as if they're all one big grocery store each in a city, right? People are going to naturally navigate to the grocery store that will have the best prices. Maybe Sony as a grocery store will say, but we have the best premium beef products or something. Okay, that's fine, but if Steam is offering similar things for far cheaper, people are just going to go to that grocery store and buy the cheaper product. It is what it is. Sony needs to realize this now before it's too late. I'm also noticing that Sony hasn't been posting much on social media or anything since they announced all of this too. They're likely, if I had to guess, waiting for Microsoft to post some layoffs or bad news themselves to get the heat off of them. But this is important that anyone watching this video realizes you cannot let Sony forget about this. You have to keep beating that drum and letting them know how you feel. If Sony wants to go all digital, they better become consumer friendly to the point that Steam looks anti-consumer, which I doubt they'll ever do, because otherwise the only thing differing Sony from Steam at this point is, for Sony, I guess, you get to play the next humiliation ritual female third-person action over-the-shoulder game from them exclusively by some PlayStation studio. Wow, Sony, thanks. This is in the end about ownership, okay? And who controls the future of games. Sony didn't create the first digital transition here, I know that. But PlayStation has become one of the most visible examples of where all of this is currently heading. The concern that many of us have isn't simply that digital is growing. We know that it's growing. We know that's not going to stop. It's just that physical options may continue shrinking until we no longer have a choice. And that's the point. And getting something back after losing it is way harder. And if the future of gaming becomes one where every purchase is like one license away from being gone, that's also inside a closed ecosystem, we're going to have to face the hard question of what we're giving up to realize the future before it's gone. Either way, what's happening now is a bit of a disaster for Sony, and it sucks as someone who plays there that this is all happening the way that it is. I wish it wasn't. I'm honestly angry at Sony, and seeing people walk away and refund is a good way to do it, but it also breaks my heart because I don't want any of this to happen in the first place, right? Sony has to turn this around. They need to justify why they exist, and what they're doing right now is anything but that. Let me know what you think as always. Thanks for being here. Subscribe if you'd like to. Can you tell that I'm mad about where video games are headed? Because I am. I really, really am.